Chien-Pao's popularity of late has been kind of slipping. Yes, it's still a deck that people play in tournaments. It's a fun deck to play, but in the Paradox Rift meta, when a lot of people assumed it was going to be better, its popularity has kind of taken a decline. However, things seem to be on the up and up for Chien-Pao EX post-rotation. I'm Jet from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I apologize in advance for my stuffed up voice. I'm battling a cold right now, but I still wanted to share this information with you, so let's get into it. The million-dollar question of does Chien-Pao survive rotation? The answer is yes, and not only that, it comes out based on Japanese data as one of the best decks in the game. Shoutouts to Omnipoke for compiling the results of, I think it's over 60 Japanese events up till now, and they've ranked them out based on performance into tiers. And as you can see, Charizard is the top 2 spots with the Pidgeot variant and the Beedrill variant, but right behind that is Chien-Pao EX. And I can understand how Chien-Pao gets to that spot, where of the decks that are here right now, Chien-Pao probably has the most reasonable time into Charizard. It runs its standard game plan, throw a whole bunch of energy on the field, and then just smash Charizards over and over again. It does still have some consistency issues, but there are some pieces that help Chien-Pao out in that regard as well. Here's a tier list from Pokekabook. Shoutouts to Pokekabook, where a number of these deck lists come from. They have it broken out, and I think this is by meta share. I could be wrong on that, but they do have Charizard as the definitive S tier deck, but right behind it is Chien-Pao. So regardless of how you look at it, Chien-Pao is looking like a very strong play post-rotation. Chien-Pao does lose a couple of pieces along the way, but it's not that big of a deal. We are losing Battle VIP Pass, which does make it a little more annoying to set up. We are losing Cross Switcher pieces, which made it easier to gust based on items, but we kind of have a substitution for that, and Battle VIP Pass. And we are losing Escape Rope, but that wasn't necessarily a big loss for Chien-Pao either, and we kind of have a substitute for that as well, the same thing that helps as a substitute for Cross Switcher. Some of those new pieces include Prime Catcher, Buddy Poffin, Hero's Cape, and Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. Prime Catcher is a new A-Spec card which lets you switch one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot, and if you do, switch your active Pokemon with one of your bench Pokemon. This is essentially Cross Switcher, except you only need one item instead of 2, which is absolutely busted. The trade-off is that you can only have one A-Spec card in your deck, so you'll only be able to do this play once. However, you can run stuff like Boss's Orders or Counter Catcher to subsidize the rest of your gusting needs. Buddy Poffin is our Battle VIP Pass replacement of sorts. It lets us search our deck for up to 2 basic Pokemon with 70 HP or less and put them onto our bench, then shuffle our deck. This is basically our way of getting Frigabacks on the board, maybe Manaphy as well. However, it's not going to be able to get us Chien-Pao. There are potential workarounds for that with the Ditto that we'll talk about in a sec, but this is primarily to get our Frigabacks on the board at this point. Hero's Cape is another card to consider, gives our Pokemon plus 100 HP. Now, normally with Chien-Pao builds, they shied away from stuff like Bravery Charm because they just wanted to play aggro and maximize their offensive output. But plus 100 HP is quite a bit. Having a 320 HP Chien-Pao is definitely something to consider, as 320 HP is very difficult to one-shot for most decks, and being able to take 4 prizes with a Chien-Pao before they can knock out one Chien-Pao is definitely intriguing. Cryptomaniac's Deciphering is probably the biggest update to the deck, where it lets you search your deck for 2 cards, shuffle your deck, and then put those cards on top of it in any order. This is an awesome upgrade for Chien-Pao because after you do Cryptomaniac's Deciphering, where you can use stuff to get like superior energy retrieval or any sort of items, maybe it's a earthen vessel, whatever the items or cards that you might need to finish that combo, you can stack them to the top of your deck, and then you can use either Greninja's Concealed Cards ability to draw those cards, or use Beedrill to draw into those cards, giving this deck a consistency boost. All of the deck lists we're going to be looking at run at least 1 copy of this card. This first example is as close as I could find to being the equivalent of a Chien-Pao Iron Hands deck that we see most often today. One of the interesting choices here is that they've only got 2 Chien-Paos in the list. I don't think that's going to stay. I feel like once this hits internationally, sometimes the meta is a little different in Japan. I personally think 3 Chien-Pao is the way to go, even post-rotation. I could be proven wrong, but I feel like 3 is the right count. Regardless, what did they do with the other space? They have a 1/1 line of Palkia, which is definitely something we saw early on because Palkia is just a great secondary attacker. It's super efficient. You don't have to get rid of energy. It's got 280 HP. And one of the big things going forward is that Miraidon appears to be a much less popular deck post-rotation. So you're not going to get punished for having lightning weakness nearly as much, which makes it okay to run Palkia in Chien-Pao. We still have the 1 Iron Hands. We've got the 3/2 Excalibur for accelerating energy, the 2/2 line of Beebril for drawing cards, 1 Radiant Greninja, of course, as a way of discarding energy, drawing cards, and potentially attacking with Moonlight Shuriken. And the one interesting Pokemon choice here is Kyogre from Crown Zenith, mostly for its attack, Dynamic Wave, where for 3 water and a colorless, you put 3 energy attached to this Pokemon back into your hand, and this attack does 180 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. This is a card that was out when Chien-Pao first released, and it was a card that international players did experiment with early on. However, it kind of fell out of favor very quickly, and people were not using this as an attacker. And I'm not sure that the meta changes enough to make this a standard play for Chien-Pao going forward. I feel like this is a card that I always saw more in Japanese lists than international lists, and I don't think this is going to carry over internationally, but it's definitely a tech worth considering. 180 snipe damage wherever you want, and you get to conserve most of that energy is very cool. Going back to the list, we do see maybe a little more nest ball action here, trying to get our bigger attackers, Chien-Pao, Palkia, Iron Hands, even Greninja on the board. 3 Ultra Balls, 1 copy of Heavy Ball to grab any sort of basics trapped in the active, potentially for our one-ofs, whether that's Greninja, Manaphy, or Kyogre here. We do have lots of energy recovery here for superior energy retrieval, as well as 2 Earthen Vessel, 2 Super Rod, 1 copy of Canceling Cologne to make the Gust plays work even if Manaphy's in play. You Gust Manaphy into the active, play the Canceling Cologne, and then snipe with either the Kyogre or the Greninja. Prime Catcher can help make that play possible. You play the Prime Catcher, move in Manaphy, move in the snipe attacker of your choice, play the Canceling Cologne. Really great combo. Only 1 switch here, which is probably fine. And then we've got 4 copies of Irida, 1 Boss, 1 Iodo, and 1 copy of Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. I'm actually kind of surprised that all of these lists only run 1 copy of this card, but maybe it's enough to get through. And then we also have Pokestop, which lets you discard the top 3 cards of your deck, and any sort of items you get from that, you get to put into your hand. And this actually combos with Cryptomaniac's Deciphering as well, where you could stack, say, 2 Earthen Vessels or Earthen Vessel and a superior energy retrieval to the top of the deck, and then use Pokestop to draw into them. This second example is strictly a water-based deck. Instead of the Iron Hands, we have a 2/2 line of Palkia, and we do go back to 3 Chien-Pao. I do like this list. I like the 2/2 Palkia. We do have a inclusion of Lumineon V here, which can be a little bit of a problem in the sense that you are giving your opponent a easy 2-prize target on the bench, and we're not seeing any sort of collapse stadium. I don't think we see any stadiums in this list, which I don't think is going to fly internationally, but I guess you can kind of get away with it because there's no path to the peak in the game anymore, that you're not necessarily as worried about that. But I would like to see a collapse stadium in here if you're playing Lumineon. But I don't hate the inclusion here. Lets you grab a supporter of your choice, and there are some amazing options here, whether it's Irida, Boss, or Cryptomaniac's Deciphering. And then we've got the 2/2 line of Beebril to draw cards. Otherwise, this list is very similar to what we've seen so far with the heavy count of Nest Ball. We have a couple of Buddy Poffin here to get our small basics like Frigibax and Beebril down. And then this one has the Hero's Cape tech, where we are either buffing Chien-Pao to 320 HP or Palkia with 320 HP. Palkia with 380 HP is absolutely nuts because it's such an efficient attacker. It could take 2, maybe 3 hits to take out a Palkia, and that could be enough to hang in there to win a game. So really interesting list here. I do like that this one is sort of a mono type list where it's only attacking with water. And yeah, I know Iron Hands is a popular play right now, but in competitive play, play, some of the most notable Chien-Pao players have been taking Iron Hands out of their list in order to make it a little more consistent. And I can go either way on Iron Hands, but I do like the idea of sticking with water just to make your deck a little more consistent. Last but not least, just another shout out to the Cryptomaniacs Deciphering card at the end of this list here. This third example is very similar to the list we've already seen so far. The only major difference here is the inclusion of Vulpix V-Star, which I think is going to have a moment post-rotation, where its Snow Mirage attack does 160 damage, and this attack's damage isn't affected by any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon. So 160 Shred is nice. Also, during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from Pokemon that have an ability. And it is much harder to shut off abilities in a world without Path to the Peak, making this attack even stronger than it was before. They're going to have to find ways of gusting around that, whether it's Boss's Orders, Prime Catcher, or some other way of nullifying this effect. But this could be a very strong I think this is going to be a strong card in general, and we're mostly going to see this in Arceus decks in the immediate term, but putting it in Chien-Pao is not a bad option either. These lists are probably looking very similar to you, and I don't blame you for that. Like, there's very minor changes here, like, are you running 3 Chien-Pao or 2 Chien-Pao? Are you playing Iron Hands or not? This one has the one big difference of the Ditto from Pokemon Go, and this is the one where you can transform this card when it's in the active spot on your first turn, where you can transform it into whatever card you want. So this kind of acts as your third Chien-Pao in a way, but you could put a different attacker or a different Pokemon in the active instead, where generally speaking, you're going to use this to transform into Chien-Pao more often than not. So really nice tech here. And this also compensates for the fact that Buddy Poffin does not get you Pokemon that have more than 70 HP. So Ditto is kind of an alternative to that. Otherwise, this list is largely the same. I do see a Pokegear, which is something we haven't seen in some of the other lists. And then we can just nitpick some of the counts where they're not running any sort of Boss's Orders here. They're running Prime Catcher and Counter Catcher instead. Maybe slightly different ball counts here, but largely these lists are the same with minor tweaks. The last one, again, very similar list to some of the ones we've seen. This one does have one copy of Arctibax to try and prevent against Devolution plays. We do have an Iron Hands here, but the most interesting inclusion here is this Bibarel card, which we're definitely going to see more of post-rotation. And in case you're wondering what it does, it has the ability Reassuring Dam, where as long as this Pokemon is on your bench, cards in your deck can't be discarded by effects of your opponent's attacks, abilities, item cards, or supporter cards. And this becomes incredibly important post-rotation because it looks like this Great Tusk deck is actually going to be a thing. It's performing incredibly well in Japan, and it has the attack Crust Collapse, where for 2 colorless energy, you discard the top card of your opponent's deck, and if you played an Ancient Supporter card from your hand during this turn, you discard 3 more cards from the top of their deck. So mill strategies seem to be back and arguably better than ever going forward. So if you are running a package with Bibarel, you might as well play this one as well to protect yourself against the mill strategy. You could also play Patrol Cap, which is a card no one plays at this point in time. And if you want to protect yourself against the Great Tusk Mill and you don't have Bibarel in your deck, you could play Patrol Cap instead. But I would imagine that these Great Tusk decks are going to also play Lost Vacuum, which can take that Patrol Cap tool away. So something to consider. I don't necessarily think you should run Bibarel just so you can have this as protection against Great Tusk. But if you are playing Bibarel already, absolutely put one of these to protect yourself against that mill strategy. And there we go. That is a look at Chien-Pao post-rotation. The deck largely looks the same. You still have that potential to one-shot everything in the game, and depending on what attacker you're using, you could take multiple prizes on every turn, regardless of what deck you are playing against, which is definitely intriguing. And the inclusion of, I think, Cryptomaniacs Deciphering in particular, helping out Chien-Pao's consistency, which has been one of the biggest issues for the deck thus far, is a great buff for Chien-Pao. So yeah, going forward in post-rotation times, it looks like this could be the top challenger to the top tier throne, as it is going to be poised to knock out Charizards over and over and over again. But what say you? Are you back on the Chien-Pao hype train? Have you never left? Let me know in the comments below. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at In Third Person. You can find me on Twitch at In Third Person, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website, inthirdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. I hope I get better soon. Again, apologies if my voice sounds horrible on the mic. I actually haven't checked to see if this sounds any good. I really hope I don't have to throw this out. But if you do get to see this, yeah, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.